stop. I don't want to hear they're getting paid for it. They've been trained to do this. It is our responsibility as the community, as parents, as grandparents, aunts and uncles, caregivers of these children to make sure that we are stepping in and supporting their education, supporting their growth and development, ensuring that they're succeeding. Hey everyone, welcome to According to Carmen. For those of you that don't know me, I am Carmen. You know, we are already 1 week into September, and for most of us, September, that first week means back to school. And this is our second year of COVID education. This is our second year of really worrying about what the school year is going to look like for our children, for our youth, for our grandkids, for our nieces and nephews. And like you, I'm sitting with bated breath, kind of waiting to find out what's going to happen, whether there's going to be a stoppage again, or whether we're going to be able to just kind of go the full year with our kids. It's so important. I think we're losing out on so much because of the last couple of months. The kids are losing out on so much relationship building, the ability to have conversations, the ability to socialize, but that's a whole nother discussion. Today, we're really going to focus on education and what are some of the important things that we need to remember and take into consideration as we enter the school year in 2021. So go and get that drink, go and get that popcorn, have a seat, and let's have a chat. So the first thing I want to talk about, and this is before your kids even enter the school system, this is when your kids are babies. In some cases, this is, your pre-planning when you and your spouse, you and your significant other are sitting down and thinking about having children, is making sure that you're investing in their future. Make sure that you're setting aside a portion of your salary, a portion of the money that you have coming in for their education. Let's not kid ourselves. Education is getting expensive, whether it is, university, whether it's college, whether it's a trade, whatever it might be. We have to make sure that we're investing enough money for our children. We have to make sure that we're putting enough away for them so that they don't have to worry about working and going to school and worry about, do I have enough money to finish school? There's so many of us who had to think about those things and remember how difficult it was. And so if you're in a position to make sure you're setting your children up for success. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have a level of responsibility, that they shouldn't have that part-time job. But all I'm saying is it shouldn't have to be a struggle for them. It might have been a struggle for you. It might have been a struggle for your parents. Let's reverse those generational curses. And where we can, let's support our children and set them up for success. As a community, we haven't necessarily bought in, and, it's funny because, a lot of us had parents who didn't have, bank accounts, or grandparents that didn't have bank accounts, or great grandparents that didn't have bank accounts. They saved their money and put it down in little special spots throughout the house. And so the idea of putting money away with a bank, with a financial institution is still a little bit scary. So, we have a number of different options. You can do a registered education savings plan, where you put a certain amount of money away every month. It sits in that RASP. It accumulates, a very little amount of interest over the number of years until your child's ready to go to school. The other option is you can just honestly set up a savings account and put money in there. And again, the interest rate on that is very small, but at least every month or every time you have a little extra money, if you get a bonus at work, if, at the end of the year when you file your income taxes, you have some money come in, that you can put that money away in that savings account to accumulate so that you can pay for whatever post-secondary looks like for your child. The other option is you can just just do it old school. You can get that shoebox, you can get that piggy bank, and you can start putting the money there and start saving it. And you know what? Whatever you're doing, make sure you have a plan in place, and make sure that plan is going to ensure that your child is not going to have to struggle the way that you did. So the next thing I want to talk about is picking the right school. And very much like saving for your child's education, this starts early on. It starts as early as the daycare or the Montessori that you're putting your child into. You know, if you're looking at daycares, you want to make sure that they have a program where in some form they're teaching your child something. You don't want to just put your kid into a daycare where it looks like all they do all day is, play in dirt, that they're not learning anything, that they're not learning the basics like, their numbers or their ABCs, that they're not learning how to write their name. And you really want to make sure that the teachers are engaged, the administrator is engaged, and they are engaged in your child's learning. So that is, preschool, that is daycare, that is, the Montessori experience. The next thing that's important is when your kid enters elementary school. For as long as I can remember, there are other communities who have moved or done whatever they needed to do to make sure that their child could get into either the school board or get into the school district that has the best schools. And our community should be no different. We have some brilliant young individuals in the Black community. We have kids who are academically as well as athletically talented. And what we should be doing as parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and caregivers is making sure that we are finding out where the top schools are in our district and getting our kids into those schools so that, they can focus on their academics. They can focus on their athletics. They can ensure that they are being set up for success in the classroom, that they are receiving the education that they are worthy of, and that they are having educators spend the time and dedicate the time that is necessary for your child to grow and develop. This doesn't just, start and end at the beginning of their elementary. This is something that you'll have to make sure that you regularly visit, something that you regularly take a look at. You're looking at the school scores in grade 3 and grade 6 when they're writing those, integral courses those integral exams. You're making sure that you're checking out, where is my school landing? Are they landing in the top 10? And if they're not landing in the top 10, that you're following up with your principal, you're following up with your teachers to find out what's going on in the school and how you as a parent can make sure that you're setting up your child for success. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, and I've kind of alluded to it a little bit prior to, is you want to be known by the school, by your administrators, by the teachers, and for all the right reasons. And let me tell you what I mean by that. So, back in the day, we used to have parent-teacher interviews, and for some parents, those were the only times that they interacted with teachers. Now, the way I grew up is I was a fairly good kid, but my teachers knew my parents by name. They knew that my parents were engaged in my education. They were invested in my education, and they knew that my parents wanted me to do well. And so, in the event that I had an exam and I didn't do well on my exam, it was, okay, so what does Carmen need to do to get to where she needs to be? And so that's the type of parent you need to be. As a community, we are, quite often we're known for, coming into school when our children aren't doing well. Maybe there's behavior issues, but we should be known for parents or as parents who are, invested in our children's future. And so that means if our child is doing very well, we should also be visible. We should be in the schools and saying, so how can we challenge my son or my daughter? How can we challenge them because they're doing well now? They're getting those 80s and, perhaps they're getting those 90s or maybe they're getting those 70s. How can we get them to the next level? And so you want to be visible to your teachers. The other thing is if your child isn't doing well, you want to demonstrate that you care about your child and you want to see them grow and develop. And so you want to know, what can I do as a parent to make sure that my child is getting to that next step? It's not enough to just kind of sit back and say, you know what, it's up to the teachers. They went to school for this. They should be able to support my child. They should be able to support my kid and get them where they need to be. Classroom sizes are no longer sizes of 10 kids or 15 kids. We're talking about, at the very minimum, 20 kids, up to a maximum, in some cases, of 30 and 35 kids. And so how do you expect your child's teacher to be responsible for the growth and development for 35 children? Stop. I don't want to hear they're getting paid for it. They've been trained to do this. It is our responsibility as the community, as parents, as grandparents, aunts and uncles, caregivers of these children, to make sure that we are stepping in and supporting their education, supporting their growth and development, ensuring that they're succeeding. If we're not invested in their growth, their success, then how can we expect their teachers and administrators to be? The other thing I want to talk about are children with special needs or learning disabilities. I know traditionally in the Black community, the last thing we want to hear is an administrator or teacher diagnose our child with ADHD or being on the autism spectrum. I get it. I understand that historically Black children have been misdiagnosed. I understand that historically this has been a diagnosis that people have, put on our children so that they could just push them aside and not focus on our children. But in certain circumstances, it is true. And so in the event that your child is, your administrator, your teacher, comes to you and says, you know what, I think your child might be dyslexic, or I think your child might have a learning disability, or I think your child might have, an issue with focusing in the class. Have you ever thought about, going to go see a child psychologist or a child doctor to see if there's actually an issue? It is your responsibility to go and see your family doctor. Folks, I know it's difficult. I know we've been stereotyped. I know this is not a diagnosis that any of us want to see attached to our children, but the rules have changed. The rules of the game have changed. And very much like what I said before, as a parent, you need to be involved in these situations. Don't let your child suffer. Don't let your child not have the education they deserve to receive because we are afraid of a stereotype and we're afraid of a label. I encourage you, if your child is in this situation right now, that you go and you talk to your family doctor and see what resources are available to support your child. How important is it to play an active role in your child's education? And I'm not just talking about what we kind of referenced in the last segment where we were talking about going and talking to teachers and letting them know that you're there and that you're engaged in their growth and development. I'm talking about when your child comes home and they have homework, that you're walking it through with them if they need help. I'm talking about, sitting down with your child and finding out what they're learning at school so that you can add a certain element of, growing up for me as a Black woman, or growing up for me as a Black man, or growing up for me, this is what I went through and this is how I found it helped when I was kind of going through geography, or maybe it's math, or, maybe it's language. Whatever class it might be or subject it might be, you as a parent, you've been through it. You're, as a grandparent, you've been through it. And so you're able to add, a certain level of understanding or support to your child. And this is very important. Remember when you were a kid, remember how sometimes you felt so alone that no one understood you. It's so important for us as adults to kind of step forward and provide that support and remind our children that they're not alone, that they are not the first generation to go through this. Maybe in a different way, they're going through it, but they're definitely not the first generation to go through some of the struggles, some of the agony that they might be going through from a coursework perspective. It also, what we have to remember is, though, as well, with education and with the courses that they're taking, there's a very, like Eastern European spin on it. There's a very, Canada specific spin on it post, kind of taking the country from its original inhabitants. And so we also have to make sure that whatever we are, whatever education our children are receiving, that we are supplementing it with, some of the truths that have been lost over time, some of the truths that have been excluded from history books, some of the truths that certain people don't want us to share with our children. And so that's why it is also important that, when your child brings home a subject, brings home homework, that you're reviewing it with them. Something as simple as sexual education, making sure that your child understands what teen pregnancy means for our community, what it means for our people, looking at things like that and kind of, putting a different spin on it for our children so that they understand what is the impact of our community, based on the subject that they're studying. Do not limit your child's education to what's in the textbooks. Take your kids out to nature, in the park, to the mountains, to bodies of water. Let them analyze insects and bugs. Let them learn how to plant. I think one of the most beautiful things I always see is taking a look at my nephew when he's outside with my parents and they're planting, and they're, for him to be able to reap from what he is growing, so he understands how, things are grown in the land, and grown in the dirt and the earth, and how you have to nurture it and water it and talk to it, for it to grow. I think it's extremely important. I also think it's important that when we look at our children, that we're showing them art, that we're exposing them to music, right? So, we look at our left side and our right side of our brain, making sure that we're exposing our children to both sides so that, they can be more holistic. So let's talk about extracurricular activities. This, for most kids, are probably the most enjoyable days or times of their lives. It's, the opportunity to play sports or play musical instruments or be involved in art classes or something. It is equally, if not more important, to involve your child in extracurricular activities as it is to be engaged in school. Extracurricular activities build some skills that we don't necessarily get at school. Extracurricular activities allow us to develop, fine motor skills. It allows us to develop relationship building skills, conflict management, skills that we talk about at work as adults, building in, adult people. So why wouldn't we want to do that with our children? But here's what's important. Allow your child to find out and develop what they're passionate about. And so don't try to live through your child. Don't try to be one of those pageant moms or, dads who never made it to the NBA. Allow your child to select what they love. And so, it might be sports. Maybe you really, as a parent, really love basketball, but your child is gravitating to golf. Or maybe your child is gravitating to soccer or football. Allow them to select what they enjoy and expose them at a very young age to multiple sports. That way, they can develop a love for, different sports. I know growing up for me, I was involved in everything from gymnastics to field hockey to badminton, basketball, soccer, football. So I was involved in a number of different sports growing up. And, for that, I'm forever thankful that my dad, had the ability, because of his schedule, to get me to this practice and this practice and this practice, so that I could enjoy the things that I loved. Something that's also important is allowing your kids to be exposed to the arts, as I mentioned. So, do they love music? So, whether it's the violin or the piano, maybe they love the drums or the guitar, allow them to experience that and find something that they enjoy to do. Allow them to find something they enjoy doing, I should say. Allow them to experience different types of music. I grew up in Calgary, and so, the hip hop scene, the R&B scene wasn't huge. And so, you go to a school dance and you're listening to like Alanis Morissette, you're listening to country music, you're listening to different genres. And so, I now have an ear or an appreciation for everything from classical music to country to rock to, the types of music or the genres of music that I love, like R&B and dance hall and reggae. But like I said, an appreciation for all genres of music. Art isn't just limited to music. We're talking about, are they creatives? And so, are they creating comic books? Are they painting? Are they going out and doing what we might have considered graffiti back in the day, but it is just so artistic and beautiful? Folks, I encourage you to allow your child to grow and develop their skills and their love of, different things through extracurricular activities. You'll thank me for it later. So, a lot of what we've spoken about prior to this is, focus on your kids that are in elementary school, between grade 1 to maybe grade 8. I want to talk to parents who have kids in high school right now. This is probably the most difficult time in your child's life. Not only are they trying to fit in, they're trying to wear all the newest clothes, they're trying to speak, the way that everyone else speaks at school, they're trying to fit in, maybe they are plus size and it's tough for them to fit in because all the other kids are like, you're not small enough. Maybe they are trying to decide from, struggling from an identity perspective, and things like that. As a parent, don't make it any more difficult. I'm going to tell you a couple of things. The first thing is I encourage you to talk to your children. Talk to your children and find out what their interests are. Talk to your children and find out what they're struggling with. And this is something that you have to build and develop from an early age. If your children don't feel like they could talk to you when they were younger, they're not going to feel like they can talk to you now as an adult. And so, one of the greatest things my parents used to do is dinner, that meal, right when we came home from school, was that meal where we could sit down and talk about our day and talk about how things went, talk about everything from bullies to our favorite teachers to our favorite class. Now, I get it and I understand. That is the ideal world. Not everyone is in that situation. We're dealing with single parent homes. We're dealing with multi-generational homes where, maybe the kids see their mom on their way out, but, their grandparents or their aunts or, a caregiver's picking them up. Find a time in the day, find a time in the week where you can sit down and have a conversation with your child and make sure that you know what's going on with them. Make sure that they're not struggling with depression or eating disorders or struggling with their identity or anything like that. Allow them to know that they can talk to you or that there is a family member that they can go to when they're struggling. I think as a community, this is one of the things where we fail. We're not doing a good job of making sure that our children have, someone that they can unapologetically go and speak to, unfiltered, without feeling like they're being judged or ridiculed or told to be strong and suck it up and deal with it. We are my generation and generations before me, we grew up where, you weren't emotional. If kids were bothering you, well, then you just dealt with it. If kids were bullying you, if, you were having a tough time, you dealt with it, you sucked it up, and you just kind of dealt with what was going on. But what we can see and what we can, through research, what we found and through organizations forming, such as the Kids Help Phone, is that kids cannot function like that. They cannot survive like that. And so we need to provide our children, our loved ones with a venue for them to be able to communicate how they're feeling. And so as parents, as I mentioned, provide that, that time in the day, whether it's a games night, whether, it is, dinner, or whether it is whatever it might be, find a time during the day or during the week that your child can just come and sit down and they feel comfortable speaking with you. With your high school kids as well, I also want to talk about making sure that you're not letting the school determine their route. And what I mean by that is don't let the high school, dictate what direction your child should go into, whether they should go, into university, college, or a trade. Sit down with the school. It really is, as if you look at it, it's like a circle of partnerships, right? With your child right in the middle. As a parent or a parental unit or a community, we're making sure that we're looking out for our child. As a school, it is also their responsibility to make sure that they're looking out for our child. And then as a community, making sure that we are looking out for our children. So it's important to be a part of those discussions. Our in career and life management classes, courses where kids are talking about what they want to do, where they see themselves. Quite often our children are, put into careers where it's very, blue collar. It isn't necessarily the university route. And even though they are more than capable of doing it, these exams and these questionnaires are not geared to our children. It's not geared to the Black community, and so the results the results in turn only bring us to a certain point. It doesn't elevate us and take us to, yeah, of course your kid could be an engineer. Of course they could be a lawyer, a doctor. They could be anything that they want to be. So it's important as a parent that you are involved in those discussions, that you are sitting with your child and showing them the options of what's available to them. Now, kind of going down that discussion of, university and college, talking about potentially going to a trade, it is equally as important as a parent to make sure that you are accepting of your child's decision. I want you guys to think about something. If we didn't have tradespeople, people who were plumbers, electricians, working for the city, how would the world run? And so if your child puts up their hand and says, I think I want to be an electrician, or I think I want to be a plumber, or, I think I want to go and work for the city, don't shut it down. What I've always said is important is if your child comes to you and says that's what they want to do, I always say to parents, or the advice I've given in the past, is challenge them and say, okay, I'm in agreement with that. I support you 100%, but I also want you to go and get a business diploma. That way you can run your own business. That way you're learning the skills that you need to, your financial literacy is increasing. You know how to make sure that you can put a contract together. You know how you can strike a deal, and things like that. And so that you're not relying on someone else to give you a job. And so that's what I encourage parents to do. I also know that there's a bit of a stigma against kids going to college per se, instead of going to university. Now, I want you to think about this. Think about your child being in a classroom of 35 kids or 30 kids for, a large number of years. Most of their, youth, they were in classes with their friends and their peers of 30 to 35 kids. And then for them to move to university, where sometimes those lecture halls have 500 to 1,000 other kids, they just become a number. And so it is overwhelming. Whereas if they go to college, those numbers decrease. In some cases, it's anywhere from 100 to 250. And so significantly smaller, they can get their instructor's attention, and so they still have that time to kind of, climatize themselves to moving from such a small class to a much larger class. And then once they've completed college, they can do transfer programs to get into university and get to where they want to be. So, I think bottom line, the conversation here is just making sure that you're listening to your child and listening to what they want. And that includes university. We're going to do another discussion later, but, when you're looking at your child and they've decided they wanted to go to university, don't force them to be doctors and lawyers if that's not what they want to do. There's nothing wrong with, being a, engineer. There's nothing wrong with going into human resources. There's nothing wrong with going into marketing and being a creative. Most important, I want you to, encourage your child, whatever direction they choose, and support them in their journey. The last thing I want to talk about is motivating your child. This one is a tough one. And the reason it's tough is most of us grew up in, generations where our parents just needed us to be tough. We grew up where, we were latchkey kids. We grew up where, our moms or our dads worked 2 or 3 jobs, and so we kind of sent ourselves to school, and when we came home there was nobody home, and we made dinner, or mom had left dinner, or dad had left dinner for us, and so we just had to figure it out. We had to be emotionally capable of dealing with situations at home and situations at school. But just because we went through that, or our parents and grandparents went through that, doesn't mean that the next generation does have to go through that as well. The next generation, they are such an amazing set of kids. We're talking about the kids who are, potentially in grade 6, 7, 8 right now. They are so in touch with their emotions. They're so in touch with the importance of, nature and social things that are happening right now in the world. And so they need so much more attention and support and motivation. And our generation probably didn't learn how to have those conversations. We don't know how to sit down with our child and be like, you know what, it's okay. You're doing great. I believe in you. I believe in your potential. But we need to learn how to do it. And so I encourage all of you watching today to make sure you develop that skill. If there's one thing that you can do when you leave me today is, go and do some research about how you can motivate your child. Talk to your child and find out what motivates them. Find out what, makes them tick, makes them happy, makes them excited, so that you as a parent, caregiver, grandparent, aunt and uncle, whoever you might be, can fill that role in their life. It's super important. This is the next generation we're talking about. This is the generation that are going to be our politicians. This is the generation that's going to run the world. This is a generation that's going to make decisions. And so we want to make sure that we set them up for success. We want to make sure that we set them up for success and empower them and give them all the tools that they need to succeed. Friends, it's been a great conversation. As usual, I enjoyed it all. If there's anything that you can think of or you've thought of or sparked, thought for you, please feel free to throw it in the comments. But until we see you again, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe. We love having these conversations and look forward to the next one. Take care.